Hi there, Dr. Joe here. This is going to be a one-take video for Fantastic Mr. Fox. This is actually about the 10th take. I've done a couple versions that were too long. I tried to upload, the last one I did to YouTube, and they wouldn't let me. So I'm going to do it again, and hopefully get it done before 15 minutes elapses. But first, let me just establish the mise en scène here. In terms of what's in the frame, I'm coming to you from my reading chair in my office slash bedroom. So you can see my books are up here. You can see my doctoral hat, which I introduced in a previous video. That's where it lives until I need it. And then, of course, this is the Soviet poet Vladimir Mayakovsky, who wrote many poems in praise of the Russian Revolution and the Soviet state until he became disillusioned, in which case he killed himself. But anyway, he has a hairstyle similar to mine, so that's why he's become a lamp. Okay, moving right along here. So, as I said, this is going to be a one-take video for Fantastic Mr. Fox. And like previous videos, I'll be talking more about the books than about the film, which again, I thought I covered fairly well in my film essay on Fantastic Mr. Fox. So, let me just talk about the books, or the book. I own two Roald Dahl books. Okay, there's this one. Um, this one is called My Uncle Oswald. It says it's rollicking, raunchy, and outrageous. The Evening Standard. This is from 1974. It's sort of risque, very naughty, and definitely not for children. Not illustrated. Anyway, of course, you got the illustration on the cover here of a woman in a suggestive pose, let me say. Above her are sort of the shadow figures of Einstein, Freud, and George Bernard Shaw, who for some reason is there. I actually haven't read this book. I hope to read it someday. But again, not for kids. I thought I had more Roald Dahl. I thought I had Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. I can't find it. But I do have Fantastic Mr. Fox. This is the edition that I bought for this class. So I think I went on Amazon and ordered it. It was like $10. So I was very excited when it arrived that I found it was a hardback with gold lettering, which is not something you usually get for $10. But again, it's a very slim volume. This is a story for children, so it's not that long, and it's a story for children that, like many such stories, is dominated by illustrations, which I will show you in a second. So anyway, let me see here. So this is the first page. This from the excerpt that I gave you from the very beginning of the book. Introduces the three farmers. The illustration here in this book are by Quentin Blake. And here you see the three farmers, pretty much in equal importance. As I mentioned in my film essay, the film differs from the book in that the book you have three farmers who aren't really villains. You know, it says that they're rich, it says that they're nasty, but they're also kind of stupid, and you know, they're not really arch villain material. Unlike in the film, where you have one of the farmers who sort of is the mastermind, who dominates the other two farmers. I mean, that's because in a film, particularly a Hollywood entertainment film, you need that sort of, you need to have a central locus of evil in the form of a villain. So that's what you get in the Wes Anderson adaptation of the book. But again, the book, the farmers are pretty much an equal importance, and you can see that in the your illustrations of the three farmers. This is, I believe, Bunch, Bogus, or whatever his name is. But just note that again, the images are quite large, they're quite prominent on the page. They more or less dominate uh, the uh, the page. So, I mean, the thing about children's books or film adaptations, um, uh, what's connected to that? But you know, children's books, there's a tension between illustration and text. In some ways, that's to reflect you know, different age groups reading the text. So you know, for the younger readers, the illustrations are important in terms of understanding what's going on, following the story. As you get older, that the illustrations are less important and the text takes up more significance. So again, in a book, there'll be attention. In some children's books, the texts are uh, the text dominates the images, and others, like this one to some degree, the images take precedence over the text. Anyway, these are things you need to consider when you are doing a film adaptation in terms of the prominence of the illustrations in the book and whether you need to take them into consideration in terms of the visual look. Um, I think I talked about Harry Potter and about the illustrations in that book and their importance in terms of the visual look of the work. Okay, I think that's all I need to say. Well, again, this is Farmer Bean. These, again, the prominence of the illustration takes over, you know, moves into the second page here. Get a little bit of text here, which is a satirical verse that these children here are reciting. The next page introduces Mr. Fox, and again, the illustration really, it's almost like the text is embedded in the illustration and not the illustration being a little box illustrating the text. So again, an important balance here, or something to consider about sort of the continuum of illustrated versus, you know, illustration versus text and whatnot. Moving on, I don't want to get blocked off or shut off again. Let me say something briefly about, you know, Roald Dahl, the author of Fantastic Mr. Fox, has had quite a few of his works turned into films. He's been a very lucky writer in that regard. Um, and one I've seen, maybe you've seen, James and the Giant Peach. I saw that in the movie theater, I believe, you know, a few years back. You may have seen it as a kid. Um, it's a Pixar film, so a different, definitely different animation style than the stop motion animation of the Fantastic Mr. Fox. Let's see, what else? I'm probably going to miss some. Matilda, Witches, they're both Roald Dahl stories that have been turned into films. And then, you know, most prominently, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, which became Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. That's, you know, had two adaptations. So that's sort of shows you the importance of Roald Dahl is, you know, when you get your text rebooted, that says something about how perennial or, you know, the staying power of your book. So I've seen both versions of Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. The first one was from the 1970s. Gene Wilder is in it. It's a great adaptation. You know, I saw it as a kid. I was like, you know, 8 years old or something like that. I hadn't read the text ahead of time, so I didn't really consider it in terms of an adaptation. But it's certainly an entertaining film for children, with one caveat in that it's a musical. So that's a little twist when you're considering adapting a book for children into a film, is oftentimes those books become musicals. I guess that's based on the premise that, you know, children really like musicals. That wasn't really the case. That wasn't the case for me, anyway. So I wonder about that logic, because you know, this first Willy Wonka had songs. Some of them were fun. You know, the bratty kids singing their songs is fun. The Oompa Loompas singing their songs is fun. But then there's, like, for instance, a long song by Charlie Bucket's mother, you know, just moaning and mourning about what's going to happen to Charlie. Um, long, 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 interminable song that I don't see how anyone could think that a child would want to sit through that. But anyway, so, books for children being turned into musicals. This, the other version, the one you're probably more familiar with, if you've seen it, is Tim Burton's Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. Um, that one it's quite different. The first one that I mentioned with Gene Wilder, 1970, 70 something, definitely a story for children. The, the Tim Burton version, more of a version for adults, and that really focuses on Willy Wonka's psychological hang-ups and background, very Freudian. I'm sure people have written essays on it. I just wanted to close by talking about the first three films that I ever saw in my life as a kid. I'm talking 6, 7 years old. Were book adaptations. The first one was True Grit, which, of course, the Coen brothers recently remade. Has some scary stuff in there for kids, like when one of the characters gets thrown into a snake pit. Anyway, that's like 68, 69. Chitty Chitty Bang Bang, a children's book by Ian Fleming, the inventor of James Bond. I saw that. Dr. Dolittle was the third film I ever saw in a movie theater. Again, 6, 7 years old. Later, I read all the books. There's like 10 books that deal with Dr. Dolittle. Um, and they're illustrated books from what I recall. So you may have, I hope you haven't, but you may have seen the Eddie Murphy remake of Dr. Dolittle, which I understand was terrible. Finally, Hardy Boys. After I was a Hugh Lofton Dr. Dolittle geek, I became a Hardy Boys geek as a kid. Read all those books. Um, they are like the cover art, the illustrations, what have you, of that series. I mean, it's really depict two kids from the 1950s when the stories were written, clean cut kids. The TV adaptation that I saw from the 1970s, a television show, was more of a sort of a hippie version. The Hardy Boys, they had much longer hair to reflect the, you know, that 70s show kind of culture for the Hardy Boys. Um, but I just want to conclude quickly about, those, all those I saw were, I hadn't read the book before I saw the films, so they were films for children. That's why I was taken to them. Well, not True Grit, but anyway, long story of why I was saw that film. Um, the and the Hardy Boys. Um, yeah, but the first that I recall, the first book that I remember reading or having read to me, and then later seeing the film version, was The Hobbit, which I actually, my first uh, engagement with that text was my teacher in fourth grade read it to us at story time. So, and I remember the illustrations on the cover of the book. And I remember Tolkien's illustrations in the book. I remember her showing those to us. And then, um, but then in the 1970s, there was a cartoon version of The Hobbit by Jules Rankin and Saul Bass, Rankin and Bass. They did a lot of some stop motion stuff, animation for children. Um, anyway, I do recall not being very satisfied with the cartoon version. Um, it didn't really reflect the illustrations that I saw in the book, so it didn't reflect the way I visually imagined the text. Anyway, that gets to some of the things we've been discussing in this class, and I have to stop before I get cut off here. So I'll post this, and I'll post my one take video on Watchmen tomorrow.